Hey everybody, and welcome to Threat X3 Productions. I am Nick, and today we're going to be doing another It's Free, So Why the Hell Not? Or IFS WTHN is a show where we're taking the top 50 free-to-play games on the PlayStation Network, and we are giving them arbitrary scores and eventually ranking them from 1 to 50. So from the best to the worst. We're going to do it one game at a time, and we're just going to try to have as much fun as we can with this series. So please enjoy. Real quick before we get started, I had to record this new intro because this was all made before we hit 1,000. So now we have hit 1,000, so I get to redo this intro. Hi guys! Thank you so much for giving us 1,000 subscribers, and to say thank you, we're doing two $50 giveaways. All you have to do is like and subscribe to this video, and hey, maybe leave a comment or anything. But two chances at $50, and that's all you have to do to enter in. Today's video game is SwitchBlade. SwitchBlade is a vehicle MOBA. You play as tanks, LAVs, and other sorts of vehicles. You escort your little tire minions to the towers, and then you destroy them. Then you destroy the enemy base tower, and boom, the match is over. This is a decent game, and despite its name, you can't actually play it on the Switch. Which is weird because this game is extremely basic, and I'm not sure as to why it couldn't be on the Switch, because I feel like the Switch could have handled it. But that's besides the point, and we've mainly been covering PSN games, so it's really just a dumb observation of mine. So far, I've covered 4 games technically, with 2 of them being outed at the beginning of the videos. And the main problem with 2 of the games were basically just finding matches. Luckily, that doesn't seem to be a problem here. Like the other games, I tried at different times of the day, and for SwitchBlade, it never seemed that hard to find a full match of 10 people. So already, this game is starting off on better footing than the rest of the games. So let's start this off properly. SwitchBlade came out in August 28 of 2018. It currently has a... I guess it actually doesn't have any critic scores, and the user scores only has 7 of them, which make up for 3.6. Look, full disclosure, this is not a great game, and obviously I'm going to dive into it hard, but I definitely don't think it is a 3.6. It's much better than that. I mean, that just seems harsh, honestly. The one review that it does have written, even though there's 7 ratings, only one person actually bothered to write up a review, and that one review is marked as a 7, and I could say I agree with it and most of what it says in the review itself. I think this game's main problem is not the gameplay. It's not visuals or pretty much anything about it. I think the game's main problem is how little marketing there was or little hype there was, and no one really knowing or caring that it exists. After playing for several hours, I think it's a solid game. It wouldn't win any of Game of the Years, or it wouldn't even top my top 50. But it does what it does well, and for the most part, it's pretty fun. So on the one hand, it's not that hard to find matches, so clearly people still do like it, and people are still playing it. But I'm pretty sure that if you walked up to some random person on the street and tried to talk to him about SwitchBlade the game, they would probably freak out and be like, please, don't stab me. All right, that's enough foreplay. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of SwitchBlade. First off, why the hell is it called SwitchBlade? After all, you play in these tanks / Batmobile ripoffs. And while I haven't played every single vehicle, I can feel confident in saying that there are actually no blades in the game. And like I said, you can't even get it on the Switch. Okay, that joke 2 times is not that great, sorry. Well, The switch part of the name does come from a mechanic where you can switch your vehicle to another vehicle. This is a really interesting mechanic because at any point you can decide to switch from a more tanky tank to a more support ATV, or you can switch from like an attack Jeep style of vehicle to a more long range snipey sort of vehicle. In most MOBAs, you have to choose one character and therefore one class or role that you will play in the game or match. But in this game, you can choose two vehicles, which means you can also choose two different classes. It's nice that if I choose a support vehicle, for instance, I'm not locked into choosing another support vehicle. You could choose two vehicles in the entire catalog as long as somebody else on your team hasn't already chosen it. So theoretically, in the midst of battle, if you are playing as a tank, but you realize that your attackers are having problems, you can switch over to a support vehicle as long as that's what you had chosen at the beginning of the match. This versatility makes it easy to switch up your playstyle mid-match or on the fly. Like for instance, you could start the map off as support, laying down turrets and healing stations, carrying your minions through the first wave of towers. Then you see that everything is going good and it's time to take part in the final tower. So you switch over to a more attack-oriented vehicle and finish off the job. And boom, your match is won. The best part is that all the experience you get throughout the entire match goes to both vehicles. So even if you played the entire match as one vehicle, you could switch over to the other vehicle and all the upgrades will be there waiting for you to allocate them. Like I said, this is a really interesting mechanic and it's definitely something that switches up the MOBA genre. I'm so clever. All of this on paper makes for a really interesting mechanic. But in practice, I did find myself really just sticking to one vehicle for the entire match. Other than that one example that I gave you of playing as a support, then finishing it off as an attacker, that was the only time I actually switched vehicles other than to just try it out. Perhaps in a more sweaty / competitive setting, switching would be more applicable. But like I said, just playing the game, I rarely switched. So while this is one of the things that makes it stand out from other MOBAs, I'm not sure that it's utilized the best or to its full potential. I think the main problem is just how long it takes to switch your vehicle. So in order to switch your vehicle, you have to press triangle and wait for a drone to come and drop off your other vehicle. Let me show you in real time how long this can take.
Under attack. Dropship destroyed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just got back from my daughter's wedding. She was 6 when this started. All jokes aside, a phrase that you might not hear from me that often, the switching mechanic just takes way too long for it to seem viable. Also, the further out you are from your home base, the longer it takes the drone to get to you. And I tried it in several different places to see if there is maybe faster ways of doing it. So like if you pulled up next to a store that's out on the field, and this didn't seem to do anything. In fact, if you were inside the circle for the store, you couldn't even do it at all. Now, luckily, you can switch in between deaths, meaning you could just spawn in whichever one you prefer for the next battle. But considering that if you die later in the match, this can actually take longer to switch than switching out on the field, this isn't exactly a preferable alternative, just more of a nice feature. So the switch mechanic, part of its namesake and part of what makes it unique as a MOBA to begin with, is just not that great. Now, obviously, you can go find a nice little corner to sit in, press the button, and then wait for it to switch, but you're completely vulnerable. Like, you can't even move. And I think if you move, it actually cancels it. So Now, granted, they needed this to be balanced because they couldn't just have people switching all of the time. But I think a cooldown in between switches, which they already have, would be the better way to go. But having time in between switching and how long it takes to switch in the first place just doesn't seem that great. I did try one match in particular where I purposely switched on a regular basis. I had a support vehicle and a tank vehicle. So when I noticed somebody was having trouble, I would stay on my support vehicle, but when it was time to attack, like when my minions were getting closer to a tower, I would switch to my attack or my tank and do massive damage. This was by far the most I had ever switched in a game so far. I would say I switched up to 10 times. And while this did make for an interesting match, I'm just not sure how necessary it was or if we would have lost if I had only played as one vehicle. Speaking of losing, I haven't done it. This isn't a thinly veiled brag, but rather a very confused observation. I'm not bad at games, and I'd say I grasp the concept of a MOBA and the roles and whatnot that you play within it, but in your average MOBA, I don't win literally every match. Usually it depends on my team and the characters that they choose, and then the other team and the character that they choose, and the synergies. All of that plays into whether or not we're going to win the match. But in 20 plus matches I've done, and honestly, I think 20 is way too little, but that's the only number I can say confidently. But as I was saying, in 20 matches that I've played, I haven't lost a single match. I've had some pretty close calls, but no lost matches. If I was playing with only new people, like if there was skill-based matchmaking, and the people who I played with were all low levels, maybe this would make sense. But there are people on here that have played the game so much they are well into their triple digits in levels. I actually played with somebody who was in the 500s. I can't remember if they were on my team or not. I just remember thinking, dear God, this person has played this game since launch and never stopped. I genuinely don't know what this says about the game. Technically, this makes me look at the game more positively because I don't have to
get good, scrub.
But should I look at something more positively just because I'm good at it? Or should I be having more fun with a game just because I'm good at it? Like, I don't like Elden Ring because I'm good at it. I like it because of the challenge. I don't drop into Apex or Fortnite or Warzone over and over and over again because I am a god at FPSs. I drop in over and over again because they are well-made games and I like the grind. So at the end of the day, this is just another example of how my brain works and what I decide to waste time on. And since you've decided to watch this video, you need to be subjected to that. Okay, so we've talked a bit about why it's called SwitchBlade and what that has to do with the game itself. Let's touch on the visuals because this is something I do on each one of these videos. I would say that they are mediocre. In fact, they are just really bland. The character models are really bad looking and have a very little variety. Their eyes are soulless. And the overall fact that you even have a character model is extremely worthless, considering you spend a majority of your time inside a vehicle. The only purpose of these characters outside the obvious skin to buy in the marketplace is to see them before and after a match, and sometimes if you die. But functionally, they serve zero purpose. So instead of creating soulless husks that make you question your own humanity, maybe you should have just made this an FPS until you get into the vehicle, or even more preferably, a menu-based until you got into the vehicle. And here are a few nitpicky things involving the characters. When you are in between matches, you go into this arena type area. You're in third person, and there are several other characters idly marching around aimlessly. These aren't real people like you'd find at the tower in Destiny. Instead, these are just bots roaming around with literally no rhyme or reason. You know what? I shouldn't say that. After all, this one could be Phil, and this one could be Bill, so I guess there could be some rhyme to it. These characters walking around are clearly just supposed to be ways of showing off the different skins. But once again, you spend most of your time in the vehicle, so why do you care about the skin on your person? Also, the marketplace is dead, and they don't update it on a regular basis. So seeing all these skins are pretty useless. So this was really just a way at launch to show people different skins and make them have FOMO and make them make purchases. And I don't really like that. The fact that these are just bots and not real people. Maybe if it was real people, we'd be having a different discussion. But the fact that these are bots that they decided to put in and they decided to have different skins on, it just feels icky. So the second nitpicky thing is, look at this crowd. It is clear that these are just flat assets that they just sort of wiggle around. And look at this one. It's doing the wave. Does this matter in the long run? Not really, but this is a decision that they made. And if they were going to show the crowd off, it was ultimately their decision to show a really crappy one. Or in the case of the characters, it was also their decision to not really spend that much time on them or even make them look remotely realistic. Then there are the rest of the visuals. They are passable. The reason I brought up the Switch before is because that's what this game looks like it should be on. I'm not trying to say that the Switch has bad visuals. After all, look at all the first-party games, and they can look absolutely gorgeous. But we all have to be able to admit that the Switch is just less powerful than even the PlayStation 4, which this game was originally released on. I do play everything on the PlayStation 5, so visuals can look better, but I don't think so in this case. I'd say the worst part about the visuals is this layer of gloss all over the vehicles. And in a lot of cases, even the environment. Everything just has this artificial look to it. Like, these are supposed to be life-size vehicles meant for battle, right? And they all just look like toys that you have your 2-year-old smash together. They look way too perfect and pristine. Like, this takes place on one map and there's mud everywhere. So how come there are no scratches or even dirt? It's just too perfect. It's like when you watch a movie and Tom Cruise gets in a really big motorcycle wreck and he just kind of gets up and he's fine. Like, no scratches, no blood, barely some dirt on him. It just immediately takes you out of the moment. It's not that I don't believe that he can go through these things that he does, but that he can just walk away from it and look so perfect. Like, his hair isn't even messed up. These vehicles look like sports cars with lots of colors and fresh off the assembly line. It makes it feel video gamey. Now, in other games like, let's say, Fortnite or Borderlands, or even another game that we covered in this series already, Let It Die, all of these games get away with quote-unquote bad graphics because of the art style they choose. Fortnite looks like a cartoon. Borderlands has the shell shading, and even Let It Die has a mixture of the two. So you don't expect any of these games to have photorealistic visuals. But this game seems to want to give the impression of good visuals. The environment is good at times, and it seems like they were really trying to make them look good or at least close to photoreal. with great textures, and the lighting is well done. It's not exactly photorealistic, but I can tell that that's at least what they were trying to get to. So seeing these poorly done characters and vehicles feels like if you saw a Fortnite character in a Battlefield game. Let's move on to sound.
Upgrades available.
Sheesh! Everything from the music to the weapons to the canned audience sounds sounds like it came from an asset store rather than recorded specifically for this game. Even the announcer voice is just a robot voice.
Enemy diamond tower is taking damage.
It sounds like they could just type in some words into a program and have the voice say it. The music is extremely generic. I think they were going for like an arena full of people type of music, like a WWE hype track, but there is just one song on repeat and it sounds like you could get it off of YouTube audio library. Here's a test. I actually did that. I grabbed a YouTube audio library and I'm going to put it next to the real song. Let's play a game. Which one's the real song and which one is the YouTube audio library? And go. Then there is the audience canned sound. Oh man, it is the same tone and the same intensity the entire time. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down based on anything that you or your team is doing. There isn't like an uproar as you land a kill. This is the equivalent of the Chinese torture where you have the water drip on your forehead. You might not really even notice it at first, but eventually it drives you crazy. I don't normally rate sound by itself, but I'm going to do it right here. 2 out of 10. All right, to the gameplay. I already talked a lot about the mechanic of the name of the game, switching, so I'll try not to drone on too much about that during this segment. So all vehicles have a main attack, the thing that you'll be spamming while you wait for your skills to reload. Then they have 2 abilities and an ultimate. The vehicles are split up into a very good variety of roles you'd kind of expect in a MOBA. You have your lightweight scouts that have a machine gun or other low DPS kind of weapon. Their abilities are focused on getting in and out very quickly or without being noticed. And their ultimates are more about locking down enemies or buffing allies than being offensive. Then you have the fighter class, which is your DPS focused class. They'll dish out the most damage and they have a decent projectiles for abilities, but also they have defensive abilities to keep yourself in the game and therefore do more damage, with abilities like shield and phase shift. While the scouts also have abilities to help you get out of danger, the fighters have at least one offensive strike ability where scouts don't, and all fighters have offensive ultimates. Then you have the tanks, slow shooting but high damage. They also move the slowest but take the most damage. Most of the tanks have a offensive ability and a defensive, and tanks have the most varied ultimates. Most ultimates kind of fit into their class and it feels like it belongs. Most ultimates fit into the theme of the class it belongs in, but the tanks, you have a real good variety. One is a smoke screen, so stealthy. One is fortress mode, turning you into a high damage dealing, non-moving turret. One restores your health full, and the last one is an AoE attack to drain life from all enemies nearby. So they don't really fit into any specific theme like all their ultimates. Next is the artillery class. I'd say the main difference between this class and the fighter class is that the artillery is meant to have a longer distance, and 2 out of the 3 have both of their abilities being offensive. All of the other characters have a variety, but they sort of stick to the one lethal, one utility, and their ultimate is based on whatever class they're in. Artillery is all about attack all the time, and even their ults being purely offensive based for all 3 of them. Finally, we have the support, which is all about keeping your teammates and your minions alive. 3 out of the 4 have a laser that heals allies, the 4th vehicle only having an offensive main attack. 2 out of the 4 main attack both heals and attacks enemies. 2 out of the 4 have abilities that lay down floating turrets and drones. And 2 out of the 4 have abilities that do an AoE healing burst. 2 of the ults are basically, hey, do lots of healing, while one ult is a black hole that sucks in enemies and does damage, and the other ult is your Hank Pym minicar. The variety of main attacks, abilities, and ults are really well done. While attacking, for the most part, you don't have to worry about aiming. As long as your cursor is over an enemy, the main attack will adjust appropriately so that you'll hit the target. This means there is no critical hits or whatever is equivalent to a headshot would be on a vehicle. That makes it way more about positioning yourself on the battlefield than having twitch reflex to get massive damage. And considering that the vehicles themselves can move pretty fast, it's nice not having to worry about having to have ridiculously good aiming. And to be clear, it is aim assist, not auto aim. So making yourself a moving target while still being able to keep your cursor on the enemy can spell victory in most one-on-one battles, but it doesn't guarantee it. You have to put in the time to get good. The map is split in a way to make it symmetrical. Each team has a tower in the center at the front. Then if you make it past there are 2 towers in the center, and finally a single base in the center back. So there's technically 3 lanes, but in my experience, people were really only using 2. Like in most MOBAs, you have your minions that spawn in and go down each lane. The turrets are interesting because they are only fully destroyed once the tower on the same level is destroyed. Otherwise, you can take down the turret and it will repair itself multiple times. Only by taking out a tower can you truly get rid of turrets. This definitely keeps you on your toes, because while maybe your first wave of minions gets through with your help, you can't then just sit back and wait for the next wave to come. You have to stay active and take out the turret again to help your minions. So you always have to be on your toes and always be moving around. This really keeps things going at a fast pace. And considering that you're in vehicles versus, characters like in most MOBAs, it feels great to always be on the move and not worry about campers or any other shady tactics. Most of the time. The gameplay overall is extremely solid, but I'd say that this is a positive and a negative, because while there is not that much to complain about, you can also fall into a routine and things can get very repetitive. Sure, you could purposely switch it up in between each match, but if you find that winning vehicle combo, the only reason to switch it up is if someone else on your team picks the vehicle that you want and locks you out of it. There's also the fact that there is just one map. So there is rarely any surprises left after the first hour, maybe 2 of playing the game. Basically, after you cycle through and tried all the vehicles and maybe even faced down each of the vehicles, most game, when you switch up a match, it means new people, new team comps, and you can have these moments that you've never experienced even after 100 hours of playing. But this just doesn't seem to have the same effect. The only difference between my first match, and my 31st match is just understanding the game. But since this game is already pretty straightforward and easy to pick up, that actually ends up making it way more stale very quickly and way quicker than you'd think. Okay, it is rating and ranking time. Here are all the criteria that I rate the games on: visuals, gameplay, fun factor, monetization. Visuals. Not great at all. And with how good the environment can look, it makes everything else with its overly glossy look stand out in a very bad way. The clean look of everything while you're literally driving through mud is just jarring. Like, okay, Nickpicky, I know, but you don't even make any tracks in the mud or the dirt, or mud doesn't even get kicked up as you drive. So it's just the bare necessities and absolutely nothing further. This makes the visuals a 5 for me. Gameplay. Gameplay is solid all around. Vehicles are great to drive, and you always feel in control. Like, even if you're going backwards, it doesn't mess with your speed at all. So you don't have to worry about which way your vehicle is oriented. You always feel in control. Some might not agree with the aim assist, but having a vehicle zooming around, I felt it was a good choice, and it makes it more about positioning and maybe even outmaneuvering your opponents rather than who got the first shot off or who is able to do a no-scope 360 headshot. This one is an 8 for me. Fun factor. Now, there is a very logical reason why I separate the fun from the gameplay, mainly because fun can be the most subjective part of the process. I could hate it, you could love it. But that's not the only reason. It's one thing for me to press a button and on screen it does what it's supposed to do, and there are no delays, there's no errors, there's no hiccups. And it's another thing for me to stay invested and want to keep coming back time and time again. As I hinted at it before, this is severely lacking in the game. Sure, I can hold down R2 and attack, and I can win literally every match. But this game doesn't do anything that demands my attention. As my YouTube colleague would say,
doesn't matter because I'm not going to remember this movie in T-1 day. Yep, already forgot.
So the fun factor for me is like a 5, I guess. Monetization. If you've been following this series, you might have noticed that I didn't even bring this up at all, other than a few things here and there. And that's because it doesn't really warrant a full segment like in the past. There are cosmetics. You can purchase them with both in-game and real-world currency. While the game isn't 100% dead, there really is no point in buying skins in a game that you and like 100 other people might see or care about. And there's nothing really egregious, but there is also nothing that really stands out. Another thing is that the marketplace doesn't seem to refresh. So it's like they're not even really doing monetization anymore. So it gets a good score for not being pay to win, but then it gets a negative score for really not making any of the things that they do have worth having in the first place. So this gets a 6 for me. Okay, let's rank this baby. So far we have Let It Die at 10 and Hawken at 21. I think it beats Hawken because both games have solid controls and are equally forgettable, but I can find people on SwitchBlade without having to sign in at a very specific time or day. There was literally someone in the comments of the Hawken video trying to defend it with saying that I have to be on at a certain time. The thing is, I played it at different times and on different days, and would sometimes get 1 or 2 real people on occasion. Meanwhile, any time of day, I can typically get a full 10 lobby, or at least 4 people. making it 2 per team and then a bunch of bots. So at least in my eyes, it's clear as day that this game is just more active regardless of when its last update was. So the question now is, it's better than Hawken, but is it better than Let It Die? Immediately, no. Yes, Let It Die has some pay to win baked into it, and that kind of sucks. But it also has 100 plus game levels, 100 or more weapons, tons of unique enemies, mini bosses, and full-size bosses. A robust crafting system, regardless of if somebody could exploit the pay-to-win to craft quicker or sooner than the free-to-play. Personality is dripping out of every orifice in Let It Die. SwitchBlade is just a wet, piss-soaked towel on the living room floor in the personality department. Okay, so still better than Hawken, but by how much? I'd say right now we'll leave it at 11, fully knowing that Let It Die and this could end up getting bumped at a later time. So there we have it. We are 3 official games in. What is the next one going to be? Oh my God, it's Warframe. Okay, this is going to be good, guys. Come in next time. Come in. Yes, just come in. Come on in, everybody. Join us next time for It's Free, so why the hell not? So I actually had to re-record the outro as well, because the original outro of this video was talking about how we were almost at 1,000, but guess what? We're over 1,000 now. So I'll take this chance again to say thank you so much for getting us to 1,000. This is our first official video back on 1,000. Technically, there was the one with the Arise developer, but this is the first one that's actually, going out afterwards, not, print and ready to go. So thank you guys so much, and obviously come back for next time when we're talking about Warframe. I've actually decided to do the Warframe one in parts because there's just so much to Warframe that I feel like it would either go on for 3 hours, or I don't know if I could properly do it justice. So Warframe is actually going to be a multi-part. It's free, so why the hell not? So look forward to that.